heard my name in there, and it wasn't because I'm anything special, it was only because I was one of the only providers in there. So as they were talking about providers, I became the example in the room. So I'm Shonda, and I am one of the TASN service providers. Our project provides support to all Kansas districts on reading, math, and placement in the least restrictive environment. Yeah, so it's just a little project. But that's also why we are kind of have our hands in a lot of the other providers, because that's what schools do. They teach reading, math, other subjects, yes, and including students. So we have, our project spans across several of the other different projects. One of the opportunities I was given, before I tell you that, my history is I'm a mom of two. I have two boys, and I was a special ed teacher. I've taught in an alternative setting for adjudicated males, in self-contained classrooms. I've taught in elementary, co-taught, and then my last several years were in Kansas. Before that I was in Iowa. Several years in Kansas as a high school special education teacher. So that's my background, and I was brought into TASN to be one of the network support providers in reading and math and inclusion. So our project has done a lot with co-teaching. You heard them mentioning co-teaching. We also have worked with districts on doing root cause analysis of their data around students with disabilities and how that fits within a system, and collaborating with one of our other partners in looking at suspension, expulsion, post-school outcomes, transition services. That was a pretty major project. One of the things that I've been able to do, and you heard about the network, but because I think we are so committed to collaboration, we are now reaching out to our general ed friends. And I was asked to kind of lead this math. What do we need to know about math for students with disabilities? Well, I went to then our math and science project partners. So they are federal grants that are given to pretty much general ed, that they provide professional development, training, and support around these content areas. So I partnered, and my counterparts have partnered with our general ed colleagues in trying to look at what kinds of professional development, what kinds of support do we need to provide to Kansas educators. Not just special ed, not just general ed, but what does everyone need to know about the Common Core, about what that means for instruction, and what does that mean for students with disabilities or students who struggle. So I am not an expert in the Common Core. Some of my friends are experts in Common Core, and they allow me to be at their table. And I'm part of a statewide team that looks at math and what kinds of professional development can be provided. So I will give you that disclaimer, not an expert, but I don't know if anyone is except the actual authors of the Common Core. How many have heard of Common Core? Let's go there. Good, okay. And from the states, and I'll show you a map in a minute, do you know if your state has adopted the Common Core standards? Nod for me.
We have.
Okay, anyone from a state who is not adopted? Nebraska. Nebraska.
Wow.
Oh, but we love Nebraska.
Right.
That's all. But I'm glad you do. Yeah. Before we get started, you've heard from me, and I can tell you that the apples of my eye, I can't just say I have one apple, but I have two boys, and I have Joseph and Journey. Joey is 16, and has always excelled at anything he does. And my Journey excels at being everybody's friend. He loves talking to people, making people happy, and being with other people. So not so much on the academics. He struggles pretty significantly in math, but he's still the apple of my eye. And I'd like you to think and talk to someone at your table. Who is the apple of your eye? Because is everyone here a parent? Okay. If not, you can talk about your significant other or a colleague. But who's the apple of your eye? What are their strengths, their challenges, their goals, and their dreams? You have about 2 minutes. I know, I want to let you know we are going to have more opportunities to share. And please, talk about it from a personal experience. What has it been like for you? If you have students who are currently in an education system, anyone, is that true for anyone? Currently in school? Okay, so that's true for you. Those who may not have had kids go through with the Common Core standards, one of the things we'll talk about is how it's going to affect and impact our students. Okay, do you see how it jumps everyone ooh and ah for a second? Because it's called Prezi, P-R-E-Z-I. I had a question. It's an application that it's free for educational use. You can download it. It's online production, easy to use. Yeah, so that's what this is, Prezi. Okay, just to make sure we're all in the right session, if you don't know by now, we're talking about Common Core today. And there is no possible way that in an hour and 15 minutes I can go into enough depth for you to truly understand all of the details and what's gone into the Common Core. But there is a website here, it's called corestandards.org. There are resources, information that you can access there, corestandards.org. I know it's really small, yes. The core standards, if you didn't know, were developed not just despite some of the information that's out there, it wasn't this idea by Obama who said thou shalt all do Common Core. It was really developed by a team of experts, people who have experience, teachers, parents, community leaders, business leaders, came together and looked at where we were nationally in math and reading, and internationally where we are with math and reading. And one of the issues we have of comparing nationally is that we don't have a common set of standards by which we all are teaching and basing our curriculum and instruction. This is a really quick little video. It's actually prepared from the DC Public Schools, Washington, D.C. for parents. It's a little parent information snippet available on the website. So, hold on just a second. Sometimes it's easier to do in a nutshell videos than
compete. But up until now, it's been pretty hard to tell how well kids are competing in school and how well they're going to do when they get out of school. We like to think that our education system does that, but when it comes to learning what they really need to be successful after graduation, is a girl in your neighborhood being taught as much as her friend over in the next one? Is a graduating senior in, say, St. Louis as prepared to get a job as the graduate in Shanghai? Well, it turns out the answer to both of these questions is no. Because for years, states have been setting different standards for what students should know and be able to do at each grade level. That's making it too hard to know if our kids are really doing well enough overall, and if they can really compete for a job someday. What we really need are clear goals. That's where the Common Core state standards come in. They're like a total sea change in education. Consistent, strong, clear benchmarks for English language arts and math. Here's how it works. You can think of kindergarten through 12th grade like a giant staircase. Each step is a skill your child needs to learn before stepping up to the next one. But right now, too many kids aren't really confident with like 2 plus 2 before they have to move on to 2 times 2. We need more focus on the skills that help them move up the stairs, or they can slip up and fall behind. And there's another problem. What if everyone's stairs were made at different heights? Well, here we go again. They are. So, a boy in Seattle who's rocking an A in English literature could be getting a C on his Chicago friend's staircase. Oops. We need to create consistent steps in education too. So first, each standard creates a landing on the staircase, a stop along the way as your child heads toward high school graduation. Each stop is a chance for every parent and teacher to focus on the skills their students are supposed to know at that step, no matter the zip code, language, or race. And more importantly, each standard makes sure all students are learning what they need to know to get to graduation and beyond. Because something like counting to 100 leads to understanding dollars and cents, which eventually leads to understanding how to manage a budget. Secondly, the standards are consistent from school to school, and they match up against international standards too. Now we know how we're doing compared to just about everyone. So even though local communities will still design their own curriculum with the same rules, everybody can compete on the same kind of staircase. But standards aren't learned. That's why we need teachers, parents, and students to help make that happen by working together to help kids meet these standards. The world's getting more and more competitive every day. But now, when our kids get to the top of their staircase, they can have way more options on where their life goes from there. Clear goals, confident, well-prepared students. That's the Common Core state standard.
So I'm done. No. I think that pretty much tells you and would tell a parent kind of what Common Core is or the why behind the Common Core. And that is, it's available on YouTube, commoncoreworks.org. Thinking about that video and about the families that you work with, that little short video that we watched, what jumped out at you?
Well, I like the benchmarks, you know, just, it's true, you know, you take a kid, well, we're moving right along here because I've got to get through my lesson plan, or I've got to get through the year, and 2 + 2 is 4, don't quite get it, too bad, okay, 2 times 2, I think it made it really clear about, it really is to guarantee or to see where kids are without just pushing them through.
How about from this table? What jumped out?
I think it did adequately explain the intention. I personally don't like the lens, like it's all about competition. We're competing against each other, we're competing against Japan or China, or, you know, I don't really care about whether we're on top or in the middle. I mean, obviously if we're in the bottom, that's a problem, but you know, what is education for? To me, it's not about economy and getting a job. All that will come if we do it right. It's about empowering individuals to make good, healthy, empowering choices in their lives. And some of that will involve math, all of it will involve reading to one degree or another. Some of it will involve art and humanities. And my only other comment is that it does indeed clearly articulate, you know, that there should be these landings on which we're, you know, measuring, and there should be these opportunities for young people to take a different path than, but will Common Core actually result in those changes? This video presupposes that that's going to happen, and I don't think that that's a reasonable place to be at.
Anything else that jumps out? No, that, what, he said it all? Okay. Well,
No, I don't think that's what you.
anything else that jumps out?
I think it's a good, I think, a visual overview that I'm thinking we'll take back for our staff to look at, to say, okay, this is coming down the, this is coming down the pike. And one of the things that our parent center is concerned about in South Dakota is parents really haven't been heavily involved in all of this, and it's kind of going over here in general ed, and there's not been a lot of special ed pieces in it. And so it just said, okay, now I know a little bit more, now we can go back and put the other pieces in. And if we're to hold high expectations for our kids with disabilities, a couple of my kids really struggled with math, and I didn't push hard enough as a parent to have them exposed to higher math concepts, and it impacts their life choices. you know, Johnny talked about, what are your life choices? If we don't do this right, we do limit our kids' life choices. So,
And I want to get, what is your name? Johnny? That's why she called you Johnny.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure.
There are other things people call me.
I could call him something else.
Well, putting the lens, because you said that having this, that it's all about competition, but looking at it from a different angle, considering students with disabilities, the thing that sometimes jumps out to me when I watch that is that everyone needs to be on the same stairs. Everyone has the same stairs. And I think that's where we have other students who are those stairs accessible? Are those stairs, maybe they do need to be modified somewhat. So not everyone has the same stairs. We have the same standards, the same measuring, but it might take other kids a while to get there.
Right.
So it's that caution of, I don't want to run into pacing guides again. We said that trying to get through the curriculum quickly. Another thing that I think resonates with me from that video, and you mentioned this too, is competing internationally, what we do, how we compare. See, I knew you were going to say that. Because looking at, this is the percent of 8th graders, this is an international math and science study, and they've done this for the last 20 years. They've used the TIMS. And yeah, the Singapore and Hong Kong, and you said it's not so much if we're at the top or in the middle, but here we have, for those students scoring high and advanced, the low and intermediate is over here. For some of those international countries, they're scoring where 78% of their students are scoring high and advanced, and we're at 30%, which is pretty significantly below. And this isn't just this isn't rank order 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a whole lot of other countries between there. But I put this together to kind of show you, we kind of are. We're not the worst. Yes.
Oh, you can finish your statement.
We're not the worst. In fact, our best performing states are right up here. But some of our worst performing states, the students who are scoring lowest, are right along with the lowest performing countries. So to me, the Common Core, and I think this is the intention, is that we all have those standards and that we all are teaching the same ideas, concepts, and skills. Alvina, but you have a comment first. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, that's where we're performing. I mean, I have very conflicted issues about these kinds of tests because they don't take a lot of things into consideration. However, in confidence though, when you do the same comparison across the same states, we're like top 3 in the students' belief in their abilities, in confidence levels. So that's an interesting juxtaposition that in performance they're at the bottom, but in their perception of their performance they're at the top. And so one of the things that the Common Core can possibly do is to maybe bridge that gap of our performance levels and our confidence levels actually being in alignment with one another.
I think it also goes to, and you had a comment, but it might also go to how these students are taught. And that's something that the Common Core, especially in math, something that they looked at is, why are these students doing so well on those types of tests? And that's something that the Common Core will do, is bring some of those different ways to measure student understanding, not just can we solve this very quickly or identify the facts and details from a passage. It's going to get more into what they think and know and how they reason through things. Alvino.
I think what stood out for me from that particular video was the slide where it showed that how everyone has their own opinion how we should measure student outcomes and successes, and therefore it's very inconsistent in our own nation. And although we know that there are countries out there that are performing higher than our children, you would have thought that we would be the ones to be at the forefront to not so much standardize, but use something at least that's common across the board, so that everyone, it alleviates all the inconsistency. And I think a lot of that has created an ongoing, and even though although we try to enhance the process, we still leave out the cultural consideration. And so I think that's always going to be an ongoing issue as well, is creating standards that really are biased in some ways as well, but at the same time, how do you take those into consideration and carefully think it through and create something that does, it's something that is successful. And I think, so for me, that slide really stood out for me. Like, yeah, that is a true picture of our nation, is that it's very inconsistent. Everyone has their own opinions and ideas of how we should do it, and therefore, while we're with all of that mist around that, all that mess and chaos, everyone else is, their scores are coming higher than ours because they're thinking that they figured it out. Then we're not. We really haven't. We're not there yet.
Corey, I want to come to your response. Kathy?
Well, I don't know if I know enough yet about question because our state is just now converting to know what the impact is going to be on students with disabilities. There's a lot of diversity in that group. But I'm very interested in finding out what you think. I know in general that students with learning difficulties come into either general ed or special ed, and if they're a couple of years behind currently, they stay a couple of years behind often. So I don't know how the Common Core standards would make a difference in that. There's just a lot of things we don't know yet. I'm not even sure I know enough to know what are the big ideas in terms of risk areas and what can we do as parent centers to inform families or work with partners in our state around
I'm
that.
going to write that down because that's,
But I'm interested in hearing more.
I want to make sure to come back to that. And to rephrase your question, you said, what can you do as parent centers? What information would be best for parents? Or what are those big ideas?
Right.
Big ideas for families. Okay.
Feel free to visit Michi's website, we have a Common Core section.
Okay. We'll come back. Yes, definitely. Corey, did you have a response?
I was just gonna say about not just the how we're approaching, but the teaching of students throughout the nation, but what we're choosing to teach them. So every state isn't just teaching them in different styles or techniques, but they're also teaching them completely different things. And so there's that aspect that the Common Core is hoping to address, is at least, if nothing else, the expectation is more universal. Your approach might vary, but the intended expectation for all kids at the 4th grade level is that they'll know this by the end in terms of math and language arts. So it's one small piece of it, but at least I think that thought is creating a consistent what. And they're going to have to manipulate the how using the cultural considerations and ability considerations and all of those things. But at least we're united in okay, this is what 4th graders should know.
So taking all of that, so you all do know a lot about Common Core already. So that's good for me to know. Looking at how many have seen, we're going to look at the math standards of practice and then the anchor standards for English language arts. This is when you talk about the big ideas, this is kind of the big ideas in both the mathematics standards and then the English language arts standards. These are not the standards, even though it says standards for mathematical practice. They aren't the actual standards. These are kind of the guiding principles for math, and then we'll see the anchor standards, which are the guiding principles for the English language arts. And as we go through these, I want you to think about what does this mean for, remember we talked about the apple of your eye, or someone that you know that has maybe a family that you've worked with, students that you've worked with who might struggle. Because to me, and you said you wanted to hear my opinion, so I'm going to give it. To me, and I am always the forever optimist, but for me, this has allowed for deeper conversation for how students with disabilities will access that general education curriculum. Because when a teacher says, we want students who can make sense of problems and persevere in problem solving, that doesn't mean they can solve a two-step equation, a linear equation with variables on both sides. It means something different, and it looks different. Because can we have a student, even with a significant disability, who could demonstrate making sense of problems and persevere? Absolutely. So for my general ed counterparts, my buddies who are working on the Common Core, I challenge them every once in a while to say, okay, so how about someone with no communication, who doesn't have verbal communication, I'll say that, but how would they argue? How would they construct a viable argument and critique the reasoning of others? It can be done, and it's helping our general ed friends see those capabilities, how communication systems can be used, communication boards, how we can interact with our peers and our friends in the classroom and argue and say, I don't agree or I do agree, yes or no, and using appropriate tools strategically. For math, making use of structure. This could look for a student, and we'll get to the dynamic learning maps in a moment, but for a student with disabilities, it might mean, can I put things together? How do I use these tools, and can I make choices about what I'm using strategically?
So in any given, what you're saying is that in any given IEP meeting, where you're looking at what students are gonna learn this year, the ability to take the specific standard at hand, go back to the core principle behind it for some students will be key. Did you say that?
No, but that's a brilliant idea. So for
because if you're working with a student who isn't going to perform that two-step linear equation, but you have to know as a team, okay, but that's part of this core principle, so how are we gonna get there?
Exactly. If I was going to be writing an IEP for a student and looking at where they were mathematically, I would use these and say, how are they showing that they can demonstrate how they are modeling with mathematics? Because I think for a long time, in math especially, we've gotten to, can you perform this procedure?
Right.
And if you can't perform this procedure, then you can't access this class.
Right.
And I think what the beauty for me in providing this support is looking at this opens up the world of the math world to students. And I'm hoping that we'll see an increase in differentiated classrooms, what we see in instruction, and how we see students interacting and responding within the maths. Before we move on, has anyone seen the domain, the clusters, the standards? One of the, yes, no? Yeah. Okay. So one of the major shifts, and a couple of major areas, if you are familiar with the IES, the Institute for Educational Sciences, the IES practice guides, they have several, and the ones on math that talk about here are the major findings around math and reading. One of the main things we know is problem solving. Fractions seem to be, that's across the board nationally. Fractions, geometric concepts, and problem solving. Those continue to be areas. So Common Core, one of the major shifts is moving fractions and some pretty heavy duty consideration of fractions into third grade. That is, that's one of a pretty big shift. Looking at algebra in 8th grade, which for a lot of states, that's a huge shift because a lot of them, it's pre-algebra or just math concepts and then getting into algebra in 9th grade. Okay. For English language arts standards, again, these are the anchor standards. And just like we did with math, look at these and think about, I love, is it Kathy? Yeah. Kathy's comment, if you were at an IEP meeting, how could you come back to these questions of when you're writing an academic goal, how does it meet these anchor standards?
What our state is starting to do, and next I can say that is especially with the reading component, is it is now becoming a standard practice for districts to include, as they're writing annual goals, to include, to tie to the specific standards as well. And then showing, what type of short cycle assessments are they utilizing to show progress monitoring throughout as well. And if not, then what types of intense intervention, RTI, are you then implementing in the process to ensure that the child is receiving those types of supports as well?
Carol?
One of the things that always kind of is unsettling for me is, I can go back to 2002 when we started standards-based IEPs, and the response was, you have to have the standard on the IEP. You know, standards are kind of the big picture, and what we are hoping, what I would hope would happen, is that schools and districts are working together to take those standards then and figure out what now is our curriculum. I think in special ed, we really want to keep our eye on the fact that we're really about making certain that kids have access to the general curriculum. For some students, it is probably as important or more to say what are the skills that are expected in that regular curriculum that this student is missing, that we need to make sure they get in order to be successful in that general curriculum. And it may be that I have to, as a teacher, know something about the standards, but it may not be the standard that's driving the IEP. It's how that school has interpreted the standards into a curriculum. And there's a difference between standards and curriculum, and I think that that's just something that I try to emphasize anyway.
And I think what will be difficult to just take a piece of what you said, because I think sometimes in special education, what I did as a teacher, and I know I did it, was I looked at the curriculum. I had an okay understanding, but my background and my training was how to provide intervention, how to provide support, how to provide remediation, how to provide adapting that general ed curriculum. But I may not have had, and I still don't have, that content expertise that my general ed partners have, correct?
Right.
And so something that you said is, as I've been trained now and shaped by my general ed friends, is that for a long time in special education, and the research in special education has been on skill development, on the discrete skill development. And one of the things that, in math especially, that we are being challenged to look at more broadly is the conceptual understanding tied with procedural knowledge and skill. So one of the challenges for, I think, special education is how do you measure conceptual understanding? How do you intervene? How do you do progress monitoring of conceptual understanding? Because we can say how quickly can you solve, and I can measure that, and I can do 2-week progress monitoring on skill and how quickly and how someone can solve. But understanding a concept, being able to reason, being able to construct an argument, being able to draw out what I'm thinking, that's a little bit harder to measure. So I think that will be a challenge for us as we, So how you like them apples? I think we've said it, we don't know what the Common Core is going to bring. So it's kind of funny when people ask me to talk about the Common Core because there's still a lot of unknowns. We don't have the assessment yet. They keep promising, but I think the last I heard, they're still having discussions on cultural bias. They're still talking about accessibility issues. So it's not done yet. And I know Kansas is part of the Smarter Balance Consortium. Anyone part of the PARC Consortium? The PARC Assessment Consortium? So is
We were giving feedback on the park accommodations or adaptations that they were trying to
so maybe your
into their
state, which
testing.
state are you from?
Colorado.
I think you're with PARC. Okay, so, and some states are still dating. They're dating both the Smarter Balance and PARC. Yeah, some are still saying, we want to see what you get and what you put out there, and then we'll talk. Yeah, so, but because I do have My focus has been on, well, we'll come to Appletinis in a minute. We talked about instructional shifts, but with the new assessments, which are not out yet, but there are some example items, practice items that have been released for Smarter Balanced. And again, the beauty of this, as we talked about collaboration before, has been how much more exposure I have to experts from around the country. That even in the classroom or as a technical assistance provider, I now have folks in North Carolina who are math experts and professional developers that I'm networking and training with. I have, that has been one of the major benefits and impacts for me as a technical assistance provider. And looking at educators in the classroom, that will benefit them, because now I can bring ideas from North Carolina, from Massachusetts, things that they're doing, and share that with other educators in Kansas. Another thing, I have to go back. How many have heard of the dynamic learning maps? A little bit, a lot? How many know a lot about dynamic learning maps? A lot means, let's define a lot. A lot means you visited the Dynamic Learning Maps website. Okay. You've read something on the website too. Yeah? Get up here and present. What the dynamic learning maps are for because the Common Core got together, they have all of these wonderful standards, but they forgot that there needed to be an alternate assessment, that you have students with some significant disabilities who will not, or it may be decided that those students, it wouldn't be appropriate for them to do the regular assessment. Now in Kansas, this has been a major shift for us because we've for many years had 2 alternate assessments. We had one that was for 1% of the population for those with significant disabilities, and then we also had what was called the Kansas Alternate Modified Measures, right? Did I say that right, Leslie? It was the other alternate assessment, which was for some students if the IEP team determined that that student wasn't quite ready to take the regular assessment, that they could take what was called the CAM. But it was pretty significantly modified. What they did is they took all the easy items, what they determined were the easy items, and that was given as the alternate assessment. So being part of the new assessment system, there's the regular assessment, and then there's the alternate assessment. Dynamic Learning Maps is one Kansas is part of with several other states, looking at the dynamic learning maps. And here's a short video. I love this video. But as you're watching this, it's going to blow your mind, first of all. Because you see this? Has anyone ever seen a concept map where you have the little circle in the middle? And I showed you that at the beginning where there's the little circle in the middle and then the ideas around it. Look at that. Just wait. It's so cool.
The Dynamic Learning Maps Alternate Assessment System is a new assessment designed to more validly measure what students with significant cognitive disability know and can do. This video will describe 1. How learning maps are related to learning progressions. 2. How the learning map has been developed. And 3. The process used to validate the map. The dynamic learning map bears some resemblance to what have commonly been referred to as learning progressions, or in mathematics, learning trajectories. Learning progressions are a series of research-based building blocks towards the acquisition of a target skill. A learning map also uses research to connect skill development, but does so on a much larger and more interconnected scale. Before building the dynamic learning map, our research teams at the Center for Educational Testing and Evaluation conducted a careful review of the Common Core state standards in both mathematics and English language arts. Next, the CETE research teams conducted a thorough review of the literature in an attempt to both document how skills develop and the precursor skills that lead to the development of school-aged academic skills. The resulting map is a complicated web of nodes and pathways. Not all nodes are the same. Instead, nodes sometimes describe individual skills, sometimes concepts, or sometimes knowledge about an academic domain. Nodes are placed and connected to other nodes and represent what has been documented in the literature or our best hypothesis about how skills are acquired. The webbing effect created by these connections allows for multiple pathways to the acquisition of content. This is especially important for students with significant cognitive disability who may have sensory needs that require they take a different route to learning academic skills. A significant part of the learning map's development is the validation process. Over the course of development, the learning map will go through a series of reviews. First, the map has been reviewed by content specialists, expert teachers from our partnering states with significant experience teaching in both mathematics and English language arts. Next, the map will be reviewed by special educators with specific knowledge about students with significant cognitive disability and their unique routes to the acquisition of academic content. Finally, the map will undergo an expert review, wherein mathematicians, language experts, and cognitive scientists will closely examine the precursor skills that make up the foundation of the map. After each step in the validation process, the research teams at CETE will carefully examine the reviewer feedback and make determinations about how to better strengthen the learning map. Though the learning map was originally developed to function as the back end of a user-friendly assessment system, several educators have expressed interest in using the map as a front-facing tool to better understand the complex sub-skills involved in academic development. As we work to make the dynamic learning map a functional tool to meet these additional needs, please continue to check our website for updates at dynamiclearningmaps.org.
Okay, did it blow your mind? It still blows my mind to think about if I was a teacher and tried to unfold that. By the way, when you unfold the whole dynamic learning maps, it would wrap around this room, floor to ceiling, with the nodes about this big around. So thinking about all of the pathways, when they talked about unique pathways, and the reason behind it is because I guess, this is what I didn't know until, when you're developing an adaptive test that is able to adapt based on an individual student's needs, understanding, especially the concept, paired with the skill and the knowledge, you saw those nodes, that just explodes. So I might have one-to-one correspondence, or I might even be a step behind that in one-to-one correspondence in math. Or you saw the sight word recognition. Maybe I'm able to point to an A. Well, that skill right there leads to so many other places. And they talked about the educators wanting to say, what does this mean instructionally? Because that's the back end of the test. But I know what CET is working on now, along with the assessment, they're still working on it, is thinking about what kinds of professional development can we provide to teachers for what a student, what would their individual learning path be? What would their plan look like? Knowing that here's where they are, here are all the different directions they can go. So they're just not going in one pathway. There's several different ways that a student can demonstrate their knowledge and skills. What'd you think? Questions? You were making a comment, Carol.
I just think it has incredible potential. I mean, I heard a presentation and heard them talk about it, and it just really has huge potential if we can flip that around then and understand it instructionally.
That's
But it's not, I'm not sure it's quite ready for parents.
I don't know that it's ready for parents.
Not that that's my decision to make. Sometimes we make decisions for parents about what we think is best for them instead of giving people information, letting them make their own decisions. But I just don't want parents would be blown away by that.
I know that that they have talked to family parents in the development and looking at, because a lot of the folks at CETE, they had written assessments for years, but this was a new thing for them. For many of the folks on that project, hadn't ever worked with students with significant disabilities. So they really quickly, they contacted our project and they contacted other folks, and we said, hey, let's talk to families together, let's get some families who have experience, what would this mean for their child? So families have looked at it, they've been part of the process.
And I think the thing that we want to remember is that this is still being looked at only for the alternate assessment. And, but I think it really helps to draw those connections and help us think outside the box of what it might mean to, some of those principles that you were listing up before about the principles behind the math standards, for example, and see them in a different context and see them applied differently. The other thing is, to me, is that it is individually driven so that, I think if I understand this correctly, it takes the student where the student needs to go as opposed to forcing the student down a predetermined path that somebody else has decided for them.
I agree. I think it has within it the principles of universal design. They did that intentionally.
That's exactly right.
They brought in principles of universal design. It has a natural format and structure for differentiation. So not just for a special education teacher, but for a general education teacher. As we're partnering and collaborating, we could look at a node and look at where it spreads and say, okay, so this is what you're doing in your classroom. How many different ways could students show that they get this? And not just for students with significant disabilities, but for students, this goes all the way up. I was able to do the special educator review for accessibility. I wanted to take it with me. They wouldn't let me. They made me swear that I wouldn't share any information. But we were able to take one node and then all of the pathways and look at it for accessibility. So how they had worded each item, is it accessible for students who have limited communication, limited vision? How would a student, a high school student, demonstrate absolute value? Does everyone know what absolute value is? Yes, the distance from zero. Basically, that in a nutshell, distance from zero, how far from zero. And we probably spent a good hour just talking about that one piece of how would a student, how could several different students, how would they demonstrate their understanding of that concept of absolute zero. Some folks, an absolute, the bar brackets on the side, said that they need to be able to point to that and say that they know that symbol, that means absolute zero. Do you think there's another way that someone could demonstrate that they understand absolute zero? At your tables, this is the difficulty. How many different ways could a student demonstrate that they understand zero and the distance of absolute zero? Or an absolute number. Sorry, I'm saying absolute zero, that's a whole other thing. The absolute value of a number. So that's the absolute, it could be a -5 or a +5. And the absolute value of that is 5, okay? So how many ways can you think of a student demonstrating that they understand the absolute value? So we're gonna have a little cocktail party. Are you ready? There aren't really appletini, I'm sorry, they're all imaginary. I know, families together told me I couldn't bring in appletinis.
I just said we wouldn't pay for them. I didn't think you were in.
So the way that this little cocktail party works, so I'm gonna play some music. And you're gonna get up and move around the room. And when the music stops, you will find another person in the room. And you will answer the first question. What are the positive elements of this Common Core? Carol said there's so much potential in the dynamic learning maps. So what would those positive elements be for the Common Core? So how bitter? What are the possible drawbacks? Because we don't know what it's going to be yet, right? So possible drawbacks. And how potent? What would the possible benefits be for all students, for students with significant disabilities? And will we be ready for another round? How will it impact us? You said it may not be ready for parents yet, but how will it impact the work that you do for families and parents? Okay? Get our experts. So, what came out of that? Share something that one of your partners shared with you on what was sweet in your Appletini.
Raising the bar.
Or did you just share recipes for Appletinis? Raising the bar. What else?
Potential.
The potential. Yeah, we like Carol's word, potential.
For the students who move around, there's a lot of potential for some consistency.
Good one.
That was kind of, again,
Consistency across. Okay. How about what's bitter? What'd you come up with your partner?
Complexity of it.
Complexity.
What about kids on IEPs?
Can we share ours?
Sure, go for it.
Ours was, we've put so much work, and I have partnered with general education professionals more than I have in my whole career. And we've been working on this and putting so much effort and collaboration into this, that if it doesn't come through, will we go back to the silos? Will we, I don't want to live in the silos anymore.
Just the amount of effort and resources that need to go into ensuring that we do a good job of training to implement. Because just throwing it out there and then saying, okay, then next year we're going to start assessing by it, isn't going to get it implemented. And that could kill it.
Yeah, and that's another piece, is ensuring there are enough resources so that the professional development happens, so all of those pieces happen before we say, oh, well, that didn't work, move on, because a lot of work has gone into it.
How do you share that it's implemented with fidelity?
Yeah.
She said the F word.
Yeah.
Hear that?
So it's that kind of party.
That's right.
Right, Becky went out for that Appletini during the dance party.
Are we geared up, I mean, our state's using implementation science to,
I know that Kansas, within TASN, that's one of our cores, is implementation science. And whenever I work with other folks, like within the math team with the State Department and our other math science partner projects, that is what we think when we're building capacity within districts, when we are building capacity regionally as well. Yes. So who are those people that we want to partner with? How do we ensure that enough resources are allocated so that those folks have longevity, that we have fidelity with training implementation? Absolutely. Can I go back to how sweet? I said this before, but I have the best job in the world because I get to work with people like Leslie and other folks that I've met. So North Carolina, Kansas currently is partnering with North Carolina. They have a phenomenal research-based professional development for math, for content math development for teachers. It started for teachers, special education teachers. They had such tremendous growth for their students with disabilities that they said, well, we want to teach all teachers, not just our special educators. We want all teachers to know this. So North Carolina, they've been doing this now for 7 years. They, with the Common Core, are trying to make some changes. We found out about them and said, we want to play. Can we play in your sandbox? And they, so we are going to be, we're writing right now, eventually. It's a long process. We're trying to get what they have done so beautifully, we're trying to capture that in an online format because we want to do the mass, let's get it out there as much and as fast as possible because there's no way we can get trainers up and going. But that's been a positive for me, is the collaboration across states.
You know, another sweet that I didn't think about, you said this, is that, and it dawned on me because of the conversation I had last night, because so many states are adopting the Common Core, and even the states who are saying they're not adopting the Common Core are adopting something that's very similar.
Even our Nebraska friends.
Yes. That's what I was thinking about, actually. But which means that there are some states, and Kansas is one of them, that has for a while been developing online resources for teachers. They're public. It doesn't mean that because if you're teaching in Nebraska, you can't access it. You can now access it. States don't have to duplicate effort in developing online modules for the training.
So it goes to, let's look at our resources, how do we pull our resources? And it also goes to that fidelity. So the training that they're receiving in North Carolina will be extremely similar to the training that they're receiving in Kansas and other states, because we've been
So
talking about
could there
this.
be an online training piece related to Common Core standards for families? That was a collaborative effort across states.
I think it'd be great.
That is a phenomenal idea. Are you volunteering to lead that?
I'm not sure.
I think it's what she just said. Did you hear what she
Are you
said?
gonna write it on the board?
That is a great idea. So what Kathy volunteered for to do. Well, we need to get consensus. Kathy said, is there going to be something for families that would be a partnership across states on the Common Core would be one, but can we partner in developing some materials, publications, resources for families and share that across states?
Community of practice, something connected to.
Yes?
Same kind
Does
of
everyone agree that's a good idea? Kathy said, so this is our little action plan statement. Who knew we were going to have a to-do after this? But Kathy's going to be in charge.
That's not so far-fetched.
I love it.
It's not so far-fetched because we already do, our parent centers already do a lot of
Exactly.
We have a
collaboration
parent center network. We have
and network.
And it's something that has been discussed on the RRC program staff, this is a need that's being asked for. And I think that CCSS subgroups may be doing some things, but there are people out there to partner with to do it. I think the big question is, what is it that that needs to be in that material?
Right.
What do families need to know?
There is a piece that is being worked on through the National Parent Technical Assistance Project. There is a piece that's being worked on that's looking at Common Core and then some of the.
I just was asking, is there?
Yes, so the National PTA, the National PTA and National PTAC, they do have some information on Common Core, and I have some resources here at the end. One of the pieces, though, is for parents of students with disabilities, parents of students who struggle, who are in an RTI or MTSS model. What does that mean? What is Common Core? How is that going to impact what happens every day in my child's classroom? That's
And what should I know when I go into an IEP?
Yeah, and making it really not just
that is
about
more specific.
what are Common Core standards, but yeah, that practical.
Right.
Here are the
How am
families I
supposed
should
to help
ask.
my child?
Yes, yes.
Families can participate in helping to assure fidelity to the spirit of this too, because if they know what should be happening, then they're going to help make sure that schools are being accountable for the way it should be working.
Okay, joking aside, this would be great to do. But is that an impact for you? Is that something that will be a challenge for you as you move forward, as you leave here? Is that how is this going to impact what you do?
Well, I don't want to have to reinvent the wheel either. If there's already good stuff that's been developed, I want to know what they are. If there isn't, I spread way too thin to do all of this myself. So I would want to collaborate with other partners, but just like states have signed up for the different initiatives around Common Core, it'd be nice as a parent center.
There's
Sign up for something. Or there's a rep with the PTAC or whoever.
The Council of Great City Schools put together a roadmap in for language arts and math in English and Spanish. If you go to our website,
I love it, drive them to your website.
if you go to our website, we actually did a newsletter on Common Core in November, I think, of 2012, and there's in that section. That's old. I like it. in that section in the newsletter for parents and families, you'll see some links to that roadmap, and it's directed at parents. We do a little stuff in there.
Okay, anyone know of other websites or information? One that I've seen, is that following me? I just noticed it's moving.
You're on surveillance.
Another resource is the New York City schools. They have both English and Spanish versions, information about the Common Core by grade level. I found that extremely, lots of information there. So that's another website, the schools, and that link is on your handout.
The ideal
NYC.gov, thank you, not org.
The ideal partnership has information as well.
So there are initiatives and there are information, but is it a strategic thing that bring it together in a community practice?
Not yet.
Not yet,
No.
okay.
Yeah.
But if you're looking for, like you say, that basic kind of information or the beginning pieces of information that you're going to need to take really and massage yourself within your own state, those are some of the places where you can begin to go to look for that information.
Thank you very much. Good apple ponies, good cocktail party. Anything else? Resources, we know that we want to share resources. Any other impacts for you? What might change? Elaine was talking about at the college level. That was,
I recently was invited to working with parents to a group of student teachers who were just going out to student teach. And it's a very small college in the kind of the middle of our state, and most of the students come from very small rural school districts around. And the retention is not good because those students really haven't had a high quality, they haven't had what they need to be college ready. So at that university, what they've done to work on retention is kind of the RTI support model. Every staff member, professor, secretary, has a group of 6 students that they're mentoring. But think about if they were prepared to come to college, that could move them even. They're just trying to get them ready for college when the expectation is that students should be ready for college. So, that's one of the potentials I see, and maybe even one of the impacts for us as a parent center.
ready for college and ready for life?
Ready for
And
life,
ready for
yeah,
life.
and ready for life.
Independence. Well, as much independence as, I still can't balance a checkbook. All right.
One of the things that we talked about as far as another round proceeding with caution. But, if you're a school, you can go and get linked to a national initiative that uses implementation science, either around positive behavioral supports or MTSS. And you can do that at a statewide level, you can do it at a district level, but it's actually built around the implementation science and how to do that with fidelity. But I'm not sure you can do that for parent engagement. We haven't, so that continues to be fluff for a school. How do you, it's a core piece to make any of those other things work, but we aren't applying that implementation science to how you partner with parents. And I really think at a national level, we need to have that piece. Because there's not enough hours in the day for all of us to invent it individually. One of the big, whether it's the Harvard or the.
And to truly have that family engagement piece at your core. Okay, so Kathy, you had big ideas for families. Did we get enough of that for you? I don't think we can answer it today, but you we've got some more things to think about.
I gotta start though, this was
It's a
very
start.
helpful. Thank you.
My email address is sanderson@ku.edu. And I did tell you, our project is housed with the Beach Center on Disability.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, so I wanted to let you know who I was before. I told you that I worked down the hall from like Turnbull's, are you kidding me? And, yeah, I go to work every day and I'm just humbled by the people that I get to work with. Jean Ann Summers is our project director. You know, her work has been on family quality of life. And I am just so privileged. I did something right in a previous life, I guess, or a previous classroom. Because I got to be where I am today. So if you want any more information, I'll let you know how we've worked together, how we've kind of gotten together our networks and working across the states. It's been I'm so glad to be here. Thanks, Leslie, for inviting me. And thank you very much. Now go find a real martini or get to the next session.